That was last year.
And you didn't get it.
All right.
No.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session here. We're so excited to have you. First session of the morning. We're going to dive right in and get started. I'm Patrick Brown, director here at MACAE, but I've got a couple of quick updates for you before we start our session. We really do hope that you are having a good morning and the beat goes on. We're still moving strong. And so despite our virtual format, we're all here committed to doing the work that we do. And it's really great to see you all. At the end of this entire institute, all of the materials will be made available to you, all of the recordings, all the presentation materials, and we'll make sure that you get that. There are lots of ways to still stay engaged with us. I know we're coming to the end of the year, but our monthly membership check-in, our next one is April 20th. So you might wanna mark your calendars for that. And don't forget to join us tonight. If you are looking for something fun to do, look for and attend the Family Feud virtual event. We're very excited, as Renee was talking about, to have that. And then also don't forget to check back into your email for the link to the sketch validation form if you need sketches. Remember that you only need to complete this form one time, and it should be done at the end of the institute. So if you're attending both today and tomorrow, you will complete it at the end of the day tomorrow. If you're only attending today, you would complete it today. It does ask you, a couple of things that you've learned. It's really not that complex or detailed, but you'll just select the sessions that you attended and complete the questions with some short and brief feedback. During the session, we want everyone to try to create this community of learning. And so we'd ask you to stay muted so the presenter can be focused on their presentation. If you've got questions, you can certainly put them into the chat and Alex will be monitoring that and taking care of that. And we just appreciate you all being here. And so I'm happy to welcome Alex Beene, the lead instructor at the Southwest Tennessee Adult Education. And he is going to be presenting on preparation inside poverty, how to effectively instruct and mentor low-income adult students. I'm going to share a little bit about Alex. He's an award-winning author and educator. He has been featured on ABC, CBS, ESPN radio, and an array of print publications for his children's books, which are available in over 70 countries. His business knowledge has been presented in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, USA Today, Reader's Digest, the Washington Post, and on CNBC. And he was honored by the NASDAQ for his philanthropic work. He was a recipient of the Jefferson Award for Public Service and has served on Google's Digital Literacy Board, which promotes free learning resources for students worldwide. And we became connected through COABE. I saw that he had a wonderful presentation and thought it would be very valuable for all of us here. So please welcome Alex and take it away.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Thank you for that nice introduction. Boy, am I excited to be joined with all of y'all this morning. Patrick was saying to me earlier, he said, is this early for you? No. When you're a teacher, it's never too early, is it? So I'm thrilled to be joining all of you virtually from Tennessee. I really enjoyed this last year virtually being able to present this from our state. And so I'm really excited. Patrick and I were talking before this. For those of you that are coming out to Seattle in a few weeks for National COABE, I'll be presenting there as well. So excited that things are kind of getting back to normal where they were, but it's also fun to be virtual too, right? Because that way I can join you from the comfort of my Tennessee home this morning. So let's dive in. Let's talk about preparation inside poverty. What do I mean by that? I think that if you are an adult ed instructor, you're dealing with poverty regardless of where you're located, right? Whether it's a city, whether it's a town, whether it's a rural area, you're dealing with it. For myself, I come primarily from a rural background. So I've lived in cities, but I grew up in a small town and I later returned in life to a small town. And so I have a unique perspective on a lot of these things because I'm looking at it through that kind of rural, what we like to call in Tennessee, the rural schoolhouse mentality of adult ed. Some of you are probably in that environment as well. You're dealing with smaller classrooms in a community where, a class may be as many as 10 people or as few as one person, right? And you're just dealing with, whoever comes your way. So let's talk about some things in regards to that and some lessons that have been learned from my time in adult ed. I always start with this story. And let me tell y'all something first. this presentation was designed for like co-ed to be an hour and a half. I have an hour this morning, so we'll be cutting through some things. I'll probably be speeding at the end, but we're going to try to get in as much. And like Patrick said, I got the chat box up. Feel free to put any questions or comments in that, and I'll scan back over those later. Some of them I'll address in real time if I can, but I'll be balancing those two things. I want to start with the story. Those of you who came to adult ed after being in another area of education know what I'm about to say. It's going to click with you right away because I've been in your shoes before. Prior to being in adult ed, I worked at a high school. And I still work with high school students on the weekends and sometimes in the evenings doing ACT prep. But at the time, I was full-time in high school. And, at the time I was in my mid-20s. And I know this is hard to believe for folks that know me, but I was the cool teacher. Anybody who's young is a cool teacher, aren't they? Well, they're supposed to be the cool teacher, right? So I was Mr. Laid Back. I didn't want to discipline. Anything to avoid conflict was my idea because I just wanted to get them into the room, help them out, right? That was just the way it was. So anytime, the school really would get down on us about making sure kids don't show up to class late. Don't let them show up late. We want to teach them that time. Me being the cool teacher, I couldn't do that. So anytime we'd have a student who would show up late, I'd go, oh, okay, come on in. Yeah, I know. I normally wouldn't write them up for them. I'd just let them on in. And one day I was doing this. I had a student who showed up probably about 3 or 4 minutes late. And I had my door open and he was knocking. I said, come on in. I'm not going to write you up. Come on in. And it just so happened that our principal was outside, who I was good friends with. And she said to me, Mr. Beene, do not take this as an offense, okay? You think you're helping them out when you're doing that. You think you're being the nice guy, the cool teacher, and I'm glad that they like you. But she said, you're really not being nice to them when you do that. You're teaching them bad lessons. And I said, yes, ma'am, I'll note that. And well, of course, after a few days, I went back to my own way. I really harped on time for a few days, and then I went back to my old ways of letting them in. Now, why is that important? Why is my time in high school important to adult ed, AE? Well, here's why. When I first got to AE, I got my class schedule list. I was a full-time teacher, and I had my times there. So I thought the first morning I came to class, all my students were going to show up at 8:30. That was the time, right? That was supposed to be the time they're going to show up. Guess how many actually showed up on time? Some of you are sitting there saying, you got one on time? Wow. The reality is that within a few weeks of being an AE, the words that my principal said to me years ago clicked. They worked. All of a sudden, now I'm sitting here, I'm saying, oh, okay, that's why I need to emphasize being to class on time, because we've got many adults who are now our students who don't follow time laws now, do they? And so they have a hard time getting to class on time. They have a hard time getting to work on time. That's the reason why a lot of them couldn't maintain a job before the pandemic to save their lives, because they couldn't get there when they needed to. So it was such an eye-opener to me. And I think that that's one thing that we always go through in AE, no matter how many years you've been in it. There's assumptions you make about your students, about everybody. I shouldn't say about our students, really about everybody, right? Having some code of professionalism and academic honesty and things like that. And you realize that there are a lot of our students who never learned those things growing up. We've got to infuse our lessons with those things. And I know that's a difficult thing to do, y'all, because we're so geared towards, we want to get them to pass the high set, right? Or pass GED, whatever's offered. Both of them are offered in your state. We're getting them to pass the exam. We want to get them with the diploma, right? So we want to cut to the chase. We want math. We want essay. But the reality is, if we send them out with the diploma, but no professional skills, we're not doing them as much good as we think we are. Kind of like when I let those students slide in late, I wasn't doing to them as well as I thought I was. So does that example sound familiar to you? Before we start, consider these questions, and you can reply to these in the chat box. Like I said, I know that it will be, we're kind of going through this a little bit quicker this morning. Which soft skills do you find your students most commonly struggle with? Would that missing soft skill problem, would that missing soft skill cause problems with future professional and or academic endeavors? Willing to bet we all know a student who suffers with something in terms of soft skills that would be a deterrent to them in future employment. So let's dive in and let's talk about how we get to helping those students. And also, this is a final question that I want you to keep in the back of your head, not just today, but I do this every day. Do you feel most of your students make your classes a priority? You know, here's the thing. People will tell you what their priorities are, won't they? They'll tell you by their actions. When our students don't show up to our classes, that tells me their priority is not adult education. It's not about furthering their skills. So let's gear our minds towards that. And you're going to see that in our slides as well. Some people were responding in the chat box saying soft skills, punctuality, like I said, grooming, profanity. You mean your students actually use profanity? Oh, just awful. That never happens with me, except every other day. And again, y'all, here's the thing. When we say those things, we're not demeaning our students. I have the utmost respect for our students. I treat them just like I would anybody else. If the president walked into my room, I would treat him the same way as I treat one of my students, okay? But we also realize that, again, like I said earlier, we're not doing them favors by letting this stuff pass, because we know if they get in a professional environment and they act that way, it's not going to help them. So I always tell teachers, you know, always gear this towards anytime I talk about criticism, it's constructive criticism for our students, because when you love somebody, you want to see them improve. And that's what we all love our students. We want to see them improve. Someone said, attending class is often last resort. Yeah, know that. Let me just go over this slide real quickly, just to give you some background about myself, so I can kind of relate to some of you. You may hear me say y'all at a few times during this, because I'm from Tennessee. So come on now, got to do it. Counties that I serve in West Tennessee are Hardin County, Hardeman County, McNairy County, and then Chester County. I serve the jail there. And all of these are on the southern west portion of Tennessee. So we're actually right over the Mississippi state line here. So we get some good crossover from state to state. So some of you that may be in the southern part of your state may see the same thing from folks coming from out of state as well. But here's the thing on those counties. Not in good shape, not in good shape. All three of those have been deemed to be economically distressed counties for as long as I've been doing AE, which has now been 5 years, over 5 years. So these have been some of the most impoverished counties in the state. In Hardeman County, a state profile that was done by University of Tennessee found that Hardeman County, only 1 in 4 do not have a high school diploma. So more than 25% of the population. And the number is only slightly better in McNairy and Hardin counties. Only 1 in 6 have them there. Here's why this is a huge issue. And I'm sure in Michigan, you are feeling the same thing. Tennessee, we're making a big play to get more jobs in our state. Ford, if you saw this, Ford, I know Michigan's familiar with Ford. They just announced a few months ago that they're going to be building their big blue oval city here in West Tennessee, about an hour from where I am today. Here's the big fear about that. We don't have the educated population to fill those jobs. And so the constant fear is either we're not going to be able to attract employers, or we're not going to be able to maintain those jobs for them. And that's a scary thing, y'all, because again, we want to see our students succeed. So it's worrisome that we have such an education gap in these counties. And like I said, Ford's moving right up the street. An hour in Tennessee is right up the street, okay? We've got folks that drive an hour, more than an hour each day for work. I'm sure you know some students that do that. And it is particularly worrisome that we have such low high school diploma attainment. Now, here's the good news. We've had a lot of success over the last 5 years. So in McNairy County, back in 2016, 63% of adults aged 25 to 64 had a high school diploma. That number jumped to 84% in last year's profile. Huge turnaround in that county, huge turnaround. We've had some massive numbers there. In Hardeman County, boy, oh boy, it was really rough. It was really rough when I came in. They were doing less than 10 a year. Actually, the year before I came in, Hardeman County was producing 6 AE graduates a year. Literally the next year, we jumped all the way to 36, and that was non-incarcerated. Once you add an incarcerated, it was significantly more. But we continued to go up year after year until, obviously, during the pandemic, we had a little dip. But again, some huge successes there. And then in Hardin County, we kept numbers pretty much just a little bit higher than what they were, but we've been able to foster new programs with rehab facilities there. So we have a new group of classes each week. So some really exciting successes there, and you'll be hearing me talking about those during this presentation. Here's the biggest thing. You know, it's funny, we say to our students a lot of times, you are where you are, right? You have to accept it. If you're coming to adult ed and you're 45 years old, I can't take you back in a time machine to where you're 18 and get your diploma for you. Yep, you missed out on all those years of a higher paying job. It's the way it is, right? I mean, we have to deal with that. We have to confront that with our students. But you know, sometimes we can use that advice ourselves. Sometimes we are where we are. You know, I wish that I had more resources. Who doesn't? In AE, we would never have enough resources to properly meet all of our students' needs, would we? It would be impossible. But I think that sometimes we can also, and I'm guilty of this, I'm not throwing y'all underneath the bus, I'm saying this for myself. As a human being teaching adult ed classes, I'm guilty of making excuses when I could push harder to make do with the resources that I have. And at the end of the day, that's the best we can do. So, you know, again, through this perspective, I know some of the things I'll be discussing, some of the strategies you may have available to you in your communities. If so, great. Hopefully, you're either already taking advantage of those, or this will encourage you to reach out to do those. But I understand that some of you may not have these resources. And so it's never about, I always say our work is never done in terms of figuring out what's best for our students. It's always an act in progress. I hope that even if you don't have some of these things available to you, it will start opening some parts of your mind to think, maybe we could reach out and try to form relationships to where we could make that happen, even if state funding is limited, okay? So let's get started with education here. What did I say earlier? Education needs to be a priority, right? We're going to discuss numerous problems with our students. No internet access, no transportation options. Boy, that has become big yet again since we've really reopened over the last year. What am I saying? Tennessee, we never closed. We were a very open state. That was a lot of problems. No support system at home. All of these things are important. But you know what the common thread is in all of those things? Not making education a priority. Not making education a priority. That's something that most of our students have been running for years. They didn't want to do it back in high school, and they don't want to do it now. And that's what's standing in the way of them attaining that next big job they want. Or, you know, we even say jobs, y'all. I know that's our main thing, right? Talking about economic development, but that sense of just feeling fulfilled that you have achieved something in life that so many others have, but that you didn't get the chance to achieve. That's all goes back to not making education a priority. And it can be a huge factor in why our students aren't succeeded, not just in our programs, but in all their endeavors. So we're going to talk about that. You know, I'll get to that example in a little bit. I was about to do an example. I'm going to wait just a minute because it's one of my favorite examples to tell. We're going to get into transportation first, okay? Let's talk about shifting priority on transportation first. This has become, you know, obviously this was a huge deal pre-pandemic for a lot of you. And now post-pandemic. Like I said, I don't know how many of you, there may be some of you that are still doing all of your classes virtually. I'm betting probably by now, pretty much everybody's back to at least hybrid, right? Here in this state, we're hybrid, but vast majority of classes were open. Like I said, even during the pandemic, students were still allowed to come in. They had to wear a mask and they had to schedule a time to come in. But transportation has remained an issue. And it's kind of funny because, we're going to talk about internet later. In a lot of calls that I took back in 2000, 2001, they were asking about all the troubles we have with internet access, all this kind of stuff. And I said, there's going to come a day when this is going to pass and we're going to deal with transportation issues again. And that time has arrived. And in fact, it has actually intensified, hasn't it? Because now, used to in the old days, used cars, you could go find a clunker and it wasn't going to be cheap, but you could find it for a few $1,000s and get you on your feet. Now used car prices are insane. Most of our students are not in place to buy a new car. And even if they could, you're going to have to be waiting forever to do it. So transportation is now a bigger issue than it's ever been before. So let's talk about that. Speaking from a rural background, one of the biggest issues I run into in transportation is we don't have a public transit system, a formal one in rural Tennessee. Okay. Memphis has one. Jackson, which is our closest major city here, they're about an hour from Memphis. They have one. They have a bus system. Nashville has one. Okay. And then some towns in the eastern part of the state, like Knoxville, do. That's it. In our communities, all we have a public Southwest is our public transportation, technically public if you call it that. It does cost money and it's by appointment only. So there's a nonprofit that holds the grant for that. And students have to call to schedule a time to get that. They have to have the money to pay for that ride. Okay, you can see where the problems are coming up, right? If it's just a bus stop, they can get right on it, right? But if they have to call to get the appointment time, they have to pay for it, all this other things, that's a serious problem. And the issue is now we need them coming more back into classes, right? Now that we're back in person and now that we know, I think for the majority of our students, not everyone, but for the vast majority, I think we can now say most of them learn better in person with our adult students, especially those that are used to that classroom environment. How do we meet that barrier? Well, I've got some short-term and long-term in terms of that. So in the short term, pursuing transportation methods that are accessible to your students, that can get them to classes and to testing sites. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, some of you, like I said, may have a public transportation system. If you're in a bigger city, you have buses available that your students can use to come to classes. Also, we have, like I was saying with Southwest, state-funded programs. Here's what I would recommend to do with that, y'all. I mean, I would really recommend, some of you may be operating out of a nonprofit. If you're doing that, or if you've got a nonprofit available for funding in your area, in 2 of my counties, we have literacy councils. And so the rides on those Southwest buses are only $5 round trip. Not bad for public transportation, not bad. Surprised they haven't went up. The gas prices going up. So that's a blessing. We'll hold on to that. But one thing that we do is we reach out to our literacy councils and we say, hey, if a student needs to take them this way, can you fund that? And so they have been incredibly generous in doing that in the past. $5 may not seem like a huge financial commitment, but it is to these students. And so, in particular, it's not used just a ton, but I had 3 students over the last year who really benefited from that. They would have not been able to come to my classes and complete their diploma if they hadn't had that. What they do is we basically bill Southwest for it, and they send the bill to the Literacy Council and they pay for it. So I would recommend, if you can, reach out to your nonprofits and say, hey, would you be willing, if you have a transportation system, to fund that? That would be a great way to do that. Here's the other thing that you can do. Reaching out to just individuals in your community that would be willing to offer rides to your students. Here in Tennessee, we have a strict law. And I don't know what it's like in your state, but we have a law that we cannot transport AE students. We cannot do it. They will not allow a student in my car. Okay. And that's completely a completely responsible rule. I understand why we have it. It's also kind of annoying because anytime I need to, I've got a student that may be a mile up the street needs to come, I can't go pick them up, right? So how do we get around that? I think one thing that I often do, I reach out here to many of our churches to see if they would do it. Normally they have staff that work there in the day that would be willing to offer rides. And I think I know that we're kind of weird about, separation of church and state. Well, we're not talking about them coming in preaching to the students. We're saying, could they offer a ride to it? And this being the Bible Belt, we have a lot of churches. We have a lot of churches who are willing to do that for our students. So I actually have one youth minister in our area that actually asks me, he'll call me up every month or two and say, hey, do you have any young people, 17, 18, 19-year-olds that need a ride to it? That can be a great way of getting folks into class. Now, here's the other thing about that. They also need to be thinking about this in terms of class as a priority. So they need to be thinking about ahead of time. And I tell my students this, if I schedule you to go to a test, you need to plan out a ride ahead of that test. Revolutionary concept, I know. It's a shocking one to many of our students. We have to start thinking of AE as a priority. And that requires, if you do not have your own vehicle, that requires advance notice to others that I need this ride this day, or I need to call you to get this scheduled. I do not mind calling Southwest to schedule them a bus. I need to know about it. If I don't know about it and they tell me last minute, I get angry. If we have, again, if they need a ride to class, I need to send somebody, I need to know about it. Okay. That's my overarching theme with my classes, is that I give all of my students, for better, for worse, I give them my cell phone. I give it to them. After they've taken the TABE, after they're official student, I give them my cell phone number because I work in multiple counties. I say, you call me. So there is no excuse if they're late. There is no excuse if they miss the test. They've got an opportunity to call me and reschedule it. That's important for teaching them the importance of lining up transportation early, because they need to understand that in terms of their time management. Here's what's more important though, long-term, we need to incorporate into our lessons, particularly on the math section, getting students to think about buying their own transportation. Because this ain't working. Not having a car is not going to get you anywhere in life. Okay. Maybe in some cities in the US, you can walk to your job, right? I mean, if you're in AE in New York City or downtown Chicago, or, you're lucky enough there. A student doesn't need a car. They may be able to walk or take the subway. For the vast majority of our students, they need a car, not just for work, but for doctor visits, to get their children places on time, to meet other obligations. If we are not getting them in the mindset of saving towards a vehicle that they can ask as their own, we're not helping. And a lot of you are saying, I give my number out as well. Yes, absolutely, we do that. We're willing to do whatever we can for our students. But it's important for them to get to thinking about that. You know what I've heard from a lot of students prior to the pandemic, I would say, okay, you really need to think about saving up for a car. I said, there are a lot of, you can go get kind of it's not the best car, but you can get a junky car in our area for $3,500 to $5,000. That can be manageable if you save up over a period of time. Well, I understand that's gotten a lot more difficult post-pandemic. I understand that. But you know what? The goal's gotten a little bit higher, but we still need to reach that goal. It's going to take us a little longer. I get it. There are better paying jobs right now. They're offering more hours. They're dying to get people in. Y'all know that in Michigan, it's the same way in Tennessee. Employers are calling us saying, send us folks. We'll pay them whatever amount per hour. We'll give them health care, places that I never thought would do that. But you know what? You got to have transportation to get to that job. So you need to line that up. And then long term, you need to, instead of spending that money somewhere, you need to start saving a certain amount aside to make sure you get transportation on your own. Got a great question in the chat box. How do you approach the barrier that so many of our students do not have a driver's license? Right. Well, okay. Here's one thing that we do talk about in regards to that. I'll tell you, I have a real issue with that, Christina, because And, it's very, very true. In our areas in rural Tennessee, they actually, and this is so annoying, they shut down quite a few of the DMV offices around our area. So now, if you can believe it, not only do some of my students need a license, but they have to drive 30 minutes to get the license. They have to schedule an appointment time to go in. So it's not even within the county. I bet for some of you, it may be the same way. What we have tried to do with a lot of our students is, if we can get them into some type of rehab program that offers a driving branch to it, that teaches them about that builds their skills up. And I'm not talking about going to rehab, obviously, for alcoholism or drugs or something like that, but some of our rehab programs in the area do work with their students on their driving skills. We've reached out to one of the school systems that was nice enough, McNairy County Schools. We work in kind of coordination with them, where one of our students was able to go and sit in on some of their driver's ed classes at school. So we've tried anything we can. Again, that's a process of just reaching out and seeing what you can get, but I completely get you on that. One thing I do tell our students a lot of times is, you need to think about getting that driver's license ASAP for ID purposes and for other reasons. But whatever mechanism we can find in your state, in Tennessee, there are different rules that we can have for getting their license back, making sure that revocation gets revoked, right? But it's about finding what steps you need to do and then trying to reach out to other resources to do it. And again, that's an open book, right? I always say to my teachers in these sessions, I'm not coming down from the mount with tablets. Okay. I don't have the 10 commandments of AE. I wish I did. I love these sessions because we're able to learn from each other and learn strategies. So, again, hopefully I've given you some ideas, but I leave it up to other people in your state and other people you'll meet about that as well, because it's about whatever you can draw information from. Public school in Michigan need to teach driver's ed for free again. Well, maybe they do. Not going to get into that argument. I don't live in Michigan, but you may have a point there. So Michigan does not provide driver's license for undocumented persons. However, some surrounding states do for. Okay, yeah. So again, I think it's just, this is one of those annoying things, isn't it? And when you get into AE, it's that can of worms that you open that you never expect to open, right? Trying to figure out what different policies apply to different students, especially those that are coming from different states. So I think reaching out to different programs in the area, see what they're doing, because obviously there are some programs like rehabs, like some jail incarcerated programs that try to work with individuals about driving, getting a license, things like that. But it involves finding those programs and trying to partner with them. And that's the fight. That's the fight, isn't it? Here's the other thing about that, y'all. When it comes to shifting priority on transportation, getting students to think about getting a vehicle. And, y'all basically went on and answered my questions on this problems on public transportation. Isn't it funny, when you get a group of educators in a room, my session's only to 9. It's already 8:33. We ain't even got past transportation yet, right? We just all love, it's like, we're going to talk about problems. We got problems, right? That's what you love about getting with a group of educators. But here's the thing about that, y'all. When we're talking about students thinking about saving up for a vehicle, getting long-term transportation, these are some questions for you to think about. At the end of the day, it's also about making class a priority. And I think what is so difficult is that, for a lot of our students, I have sympathy for them if they don't have a car. I do. I have sympathy for them if they're relying on their older brother or sister or their parent or a friend to go places with. And if that friend can't drive them there that day, they can't go. I have sympathy. Of course we do. We're completely sympathetic to our students. But here's the thing, that sympathy dies when it's clear to me that you're not making my classes a priority with that transportation. And that's something that I make known to my students. When we're teaching soft skills, if you get access to a vehicle on a day we have classes or testing and you don't come to class, you're not making education a priority. You can't expect me to take you seriously. One of the biggest examples of this that just infuriated me This was in my first year in AE, towards the end of that first year. I was teaching one of my classes at a library in Grand Junction, Tennessee. Boy, doesn't that sound like a great rural name for a town, Grand Junction? It's a great little town. It looks just like you would picture a Grand Junction to look, okay? But I was teaching, actually, it was a library that was inside of an old church building. So it's kind of neat, you know, it was like a neat little building. And the lead librarian there was incredible. She was a great advocate for AE. And we had a student there that was just a handful. I mean, she just, y'all know how it is. She was just, you know, all over the place. There was always drama at home. There was always drama at work. But she was trying to get this new job she needed a diploma for. Y'all, her pre-tests were fantastic. I mean, she comes in first time, great on the TABE, great on OPT. We're ready to send her a test. First time she goes and takes the high set, she passes everything but the science. And she was off 1 point on the science, okay? So I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, let's go back, let's rush back, right? I was like, come back to class. So she comes back to class, we go over things. I'm like, we're gonna get her out of here. We're gonna get her done with this, right? Day the exam comes, I'm not at the testing facility. I normally would call up there probably like an hour after they started just to see who was there and who wasn't. And they tell me, and I said, is she there yet this morning? No, she hasn't shown up. I was like, oh, okay. Well, she was just supposed to take that one thing. Yep, she hasn't been here. I said, well, okay, well, let me know if she can, if you don't mind. Okay, well, she never showed up. I tried to text her, could not get a hold of her. Tried to call her, couldn't get a hold of her. Finally, at, you know, I would say right around the time, probably about 15 minutes past her start time. Okay, so she was scheduled in the morning. She was scheduled to be there. Normally she'd show up early, probably about 15, 20 minutes after her start time had started. I get a call from her. I'm really excited, right? I'm like, oh good, she showed up, right? She's there, I'm glad. So I pick up the phone and say, hey, and she says, yeah, I can't make it today. I can't get a ride. I said, oh, okay, well, why didn't you tell me about that part? Well, it just came up sudden, started saying this morning. And the whole time, y'all, I'm hearing voices. I'm hearing chatter. I'm hearing someone ask somebody if they want a sausage and biscuit with their coffee. And I went, I said, if you don't mind me asking, where are you at right now? She said, oh, well, I went to McDonald's for some breakfast, but my sister was already going here. Okay. So you did have a ride, but you decided a McGriddle was more important than getting a high school diploma. That's on you. That's not making education a priority. Like I said, all of this goes back to that. These gaps in public transportation are real. We've talked about them. We've talked about some strategies for them. But I'm going to tell you, if they're not making education a priority, you could give them a new Tesla. You could give them the charging port. You could put charging ports at every mile on their way. And if they're not making our classes a priority, none of this is going to add up for them. They're still not going to show up. So needless to say, and yes, y'all, she did come back and get her diploma finally. And needless to say, I couldn't even deal with it. She walked in the room. I was like, I don't want to deal with it today. Just go in there and earn your diploma. So hope she enjoyed the McGriddle. Now she's got her diploma, but hopefully she learned her lesson, because after that, she, you know, I remember she said at graduation the following year, she said, yeah, I was stupid that day. She saw it. Sometimes it takes time. It's okay if you don't get it right away, but if you go on and you don't make education a priority, if we're not teaching that to our students, if we don't show them that we don't like what they're doing, that they need to do better, how can we expect them to grow? She did grow, thankfully. So many of you probably have examples like that too, and probably places more out there than McDonald's that they go to. Let's talk about, moving on from transportation, let's talk about online access for a minute. Okay, so when it comes to online access, this became a huge deal during the pandemic, didn't it? The overarching theme. Here's one thing that we really dealt with in Tennessee that I'm sure y'all also dealt with in Michigan. See, there goes y'all. Told you it's coming. The state immediately, within a few weeks of the pandemic, started sending us out all of these new digital forms, virtual guidelines, all this kind of stuff, virtual sign-in sheets, all this type of great stuff, right? And so it was kind of funny. A few weeks later, we were in meetings, they were giving themselves pats on the back already. Man, we really adapted to this pandemic. Man, we really came with the times, right? I mean, here we are just a few months after the shutdown. We've already got a completely virtual system. Y'all know what the problem was? Virtual system doesn't work so well when you're in a rural area, does it? Oh, you think everybody's got online? Oh, come on and take a ride with me. I can show you quite a few homes that don't have online. In fact, on my way to Hardeman County every morning, when I'm driving there for classes, I go through miles and miles of rural homes, many of which up until last year didn't even have the ability for online access, okay? That's still an issue in many parts of Tennessee. Online access is a huge thing for our students today. It's the dominant thing. It's perhaps even more important than transportation has become, because you have to have that online presence now to fill out most applications for employers. You have to have it to search for jobs. You have to have it to connect for things. And here's the thing, y'all. I think that what we're increasingly seeing in Tennessee is, I know being a more northern state, you may not have these issues, but in Tennessee, we used to have bad weather days, right? Where we'd let schools and our AE programs out if we had snow and flooding and things like that. It's not to say we don't have those still, we will when it gets rougher, but increasingly you're seeing now more and more schools say, hey, instead we're just gonna go virtual. We're just gonna go virtual for that day. So you don't have to come to school, but you are gonna have to be here virtually that day. I think you're going to see more of that with school and with employers moving forward. So it's absolutely essential that our students have online access. Absolutely essential. Here's the great thing. Thankfully, during the pandemic, we saw more state and national levels of funding for online access for our students. So here in Tennessee, if you qualify income-wise, you can get reduced internet that I don't think is any more than maybe like $15 a month. Best deal in the world, okay? Best deal in the world. Tennessee partnered with a few different online groups to go out and do that. So you do have to fill out documentation. You have to go into the provider in your area. Again, like I was showing you in that last slide for our Transportation Southwest is that provider. You have to go in and file for them to get that lower income access to internet. But it's absolutely essential that we connect our students with that. In 2022, I think you've got to have internet access at your home. You've got to. The library, I love the library. We do classes at the library. The library isn't open 24/7. McDonald's parking lot. Not only is it not safe, I would recommend not sitting in your car there for hours on end in the cold or in Tennessee heat trying to connect to a Wi-Fi signal. This is a part of being an adult. You have to prioritize online access for your future. Here's the thing, y'all. A lot of times our students, and this goes back to long-term planning, you know this, a lot of our students come to us with an idea in mind of a job that they're trying to attain, and they're coming to us for the diploma to attain it, right? But here's the thing, I always say to students, always keep looking, right? Keep looking, because especially in this economy, there are new jobs opening up all the time that pay better than yours, that you'd like more. You've got to have online access to reach those jobs. But it's important that our students make that online access a priority. Much like the car, they've got to figure out their own online access. It doesn't make sense to be constantly dependent. I'm glad that we have the libraries. I think they're a great resource. I'm glad that we have online, and I encourage our students to use it. But I always tell them, this should be a stepping stone. This should not be, oh, okay, I'm going to use free internet from the library for the rest of my life. It needs to be a stepping stone to get it in our homes, okay? So looking for state and federal funds that you could offer that to your students at a discounted rate is important. Like I said, in the meantime, obviously you can lean on your libraries and other public institutions for free Wi-Fi, but it's so important that we get them in that mindset. The other thing that I tell students is with that, sometimes it's like, well, I've got phone service. I've got phone service. And that is okay, especially for students. Like I said, if you are living in a very rural area, there's some deep wooded areas here in Tennessee that may not have the technology there yet to get home wireless internet. Okay, I completely get that. But for the majority of our students now in the last 2 years, that now is an option and at a reduced rate. I tell them it's so important to get that just to have that stability. Because again, you know how it is with phone signals, they go in and out, and our students don't always pay their bills. And sometimes they go from phone to phone. Y'all know that drama. It's what I like to call the adulthood carousel of phones, isn't it? It's a new phone every week. It's changing up. You know, sometimes it has service, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the data is limited, sometimes it doesn't. It changes every time we talk to a student. I swear to you, I have one student right now, y'all. He has called me from a new number every time. I sit there and I go, and it's like different states too. It's like Atlanta, New Orleans, Nashville. I'll see the different ones on. I'm like, is this guy, is he James Bond? Or is he actually an AE student? I guess he's just he's picking up different spots. He's getting different phones from different friends that he's around. Here's the problem with that. Again, going back to those soft skills. Employers want consistency. They want consistency, right? They want to be able to get with their employees anytime they can to offer them opportunities. If you're applying for a job, they want to know that that number they're reaching out to, or that email you gave them, that they can reach you at any time and get back with you quickly. So having that online access in our homes that's stable is a huge part of being able to meet that professional needs. And of course, the hope is, y'all, I think that with all of us during the pandemic, I know that there aren't a ton of jobs that have this, but the hope is, you know, I say to our students, you know, they say, well, boy, it looks nice to be able to work from home. Well, let's start working towards that. But guess what? If you want to prove that you can work from home and you don't have internet access, not going to work out, right? So we have to look for places to do that. Someone put in the chat box, our program provides hotspots, but yeah, US is way behind on tech. I agree. And it's been that way. That's such a great example of that. You know, I've said that for years, back when I went to Europe in college, and then I went once or twice on trips post-college when I was working my master's. And you would see, you know, Wi-Fi access at so many places, you know, it was ingrained in the culture and a lot of people used it. Here in the US, it's a lot more spotty. You know, you may find it certain places, you may not. And our students relying on that is a huge problem. But at the same point, to your point, our states have to do that. I always say, again, this uses your advocacy platform as well. Anytime I meet with a state official, anytime we have a representative that comes to a graduation or shows up at a workforce meeting or whatever, and they'll ask, what does AE need? And, you know, who knows if we'll actually get it right, or if the person's even really listening. But the thing I will always go back to is online access and transportation. And I think that now with online access, like I said, with Ford now coming, with other companies coming to Tennessee, that's why we've seen an expansion of that. But y'all, it's not just about doing that. It's also providing the funding so folks can do that. Because as you'll know, online access isn't cheap these days. I mean, if you're getting it through certain providers, it's going to be quite expensive. So also making sure we have state funds available to subsidize that internet for our folks, so they have it until they have a job where they're able to pay for regular service on their own. And what Carol's saying, our school district furnishes students with Chromebooks and hotspots. Whoa, man, Carol, I need, if you got an opening, can I move to your location, please? And that sounds great. And I know, no place sounds as great as it is, but yeah, I mean, I know that some schools did start handing out, Shelby County schools did that during the pandemic. They did that some during it. And again, you know, I think that, you know, like most students have online access. Some areas of the country are better than others. Like I said, in Tennessee, that's a huge setback for us. And like I said, even if you've got it in your area, students may not have it consistently at their home, and we need to get them in the mindset of saving towards being able to have online access regularly from their home. So let's talk about soft skills for a minute. We talked about transportation needs. We talked about online usage. How many of these soft skills are lacking in your students? You see self-motivation, leadership, communication, negotiation, and conflict resolution. Which of these are missing? Here's the problem. No, I can't believe I have 10 minutes left. Can we, Patrick, can we extend this till like noon? I could talk all day. I know all of you could. I know all of you could. Here's the deal. Oh, absolutely, Kara, absolutely. Here's what I'm going to say about this. For a lot of our students, I'm just going to shoot straight because y'all know this. I've just mentioned things that are really important. We're talking about soft skills here. Here's the reality. How many of you are just happy when your students actually show up? We are so eager for them to come in and sit down and listen, or take a pretest, or take an OPT. Just get with us. That we do not devote many times to the soft skills because we just want to get to the subject they need help. It's understandable. I get it. And I've said that a lot of times to, a lot of our people at the state level here in Tennessee. I've said, look, I understand soft skills are important, but you also got to understand when someone comes into the door to my classroom and hasn't been there for 4 weeks and they need math, guess what I'm thinking? Math, 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 math. Not thinking about teamwork, not thinking about flexibility. Here's the issue though. These elements, we call them soft skills. Really, they can be more essential than the diploma itself in certain jobs, can't they? You can have all the tools at your disposal. You can have all the fancy degrees. And if you don't fit personality-wise as an employee, you're not going to stick at someplace for long. So what I've tried to do in my lessons is to incorporate those soft skills into things that we already have. So, for example, with our math section to the high set, I talk about negotiation, about how to negotiate a salary when you get to that point. When you start to see you're more valuable, how can you do that later in life? We talk about saving up for that car. We talk about how interest rates are done. When it comes to the reading section of high set, and I don't know if y'all primarily do high set or GED. I know some states do both. Some states do one, some states do the other. But with high set, the reading section has got much more practical based reading passages over the last few years. That's been a huge problem for a lot of our students because they were used to those more literary passages that were on it before. So I've went over instruction guides to certain jobs, different how-to guides for how to act professionally. We've used that as reading practice. That could be a great thing for your students as well. But I think that anytime, again, I think the problem is at a state level and at a local level, we think of these things as being separate from our subjects. And because of that, we sit there and say, well, I don't have time to do that. Well, our students need these skills. So I think the best way is to start brainstorming on these about how can I incorporate into the lessons that I'm already have. Okay, so this person's coming in for math. Great. How can I incorporate some of those soft skills into my math lesson? I think that is the best way to tackle these instead of separating them out. And it's a huge deal for our students that are, obviously all of our students, but particularly with our students who are living in rural areas. Y'all, I've got about a dozen other slides here. I'm going to talk for these last few minutes. I'm going to talk about time management, all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to try to kind of sum these up because y'all have been so engaged and I've loved this so much. So I'm going to try to kind of wrap these things up over the next few minutes. A lot of you are talking in the chat box about self-value is very important. And I love what Bonnie said, and this is what made my mind go off. I know I've got time management in front of me, but she said small successes help. Yep. Let's go back to what I mentioned at the beginning. What did I say at the beginning? You are where you are. You can't go back in time and fix it. You can only do better moving forward. I've had many students that have been in that position over the years. And I'll tell you about one that I have right now that thankfully just got his diploma last month. He was at my jail class. Young man, 18 years old, lived in Memphis. Father dies. Mom's nowhere to be found. Older brother's going to raise it. Guess what happens? They go through a few rough weeks. Nearly starved because they didn't have a lot of food lying around. He had to go over to his aunt's to find things for time, had to sneak in there. She wasn't too hospitable to that. So when his brother came home one night from who knows where at 10:30 and said, take this gun, we're going to go hold up a convenience store. He said, yeah. He didn't know any better. He's 18 years old. He's hungry. He doesn't know what he's doing with his life. Brother comes in, hands him a gun, says, let's do it. They got him 10 years in prison. So now he's in my class and he's about to get out. And the first week that I had him, y'all, it was a nightmare. It was not fun. He was trying to cause trouble. He was trying to cause issues. But one of the workers at the jail said to me, said, you know, if you hang in there with him, if you work with him, if he becomes friendly with you, you'll be able to get more out of him. And sure enough, I was. We developed a bigger bond over the next few weeks. And he told me a few weeks ago, he said, you know, he said, I just hate it because he said, I've wasted these like prime years of my life. I've wasted my 20s in jail. And he said, and I said, yep, but there's nothing you can do about that now. You're about to get out. You're about to get your diploma. He said, yep. He said, all I can do is get better from now. Getting released, he already has a job lined up with Caterpillar. 30 miles away. They've been working with us on inmates that we recommend who have their diplomas, who have work certificates from the jail. He's already got a job. He's going to get his life together. He could have been defeated, but he was. But again, it's baby steps. I had to get him more confident with this stuff each week. Building things up slowly is very important because for our students, they've been geared to think what? I got to get it now. All I know is I need this sheet of paper to get this job. I've got to have it now. It can't be baby steps. I've got to have the whole thing now. Well, that's not how the process of success works. And when we're talking about these soft skills like here, time management, which I'm not going to have a ton of time to talk about, that's one of my favorite lines to do with folks. I say, you know, when you come into our class, we say, come on in and sit down. When you come in late to your boss, he says, you're fired, right? That's a good line to give your students about time management. But I think that what's so important is we don't have to infuse all of these soft skills all in a day. That what you saw a slide ago, what we were talking about, those 10, you don't have to do that all in a day. Build it up slowly. See where you can incorporate into your lessons. This is a process not just for the student, but for you. And if you can build it up slowly over time, that's how, Bonnie, again, I love that line about small successes help. That's how you build up that self-value. That's how you build up the importance of these that they need to have in their daily lives. You know, I always use this example with students. I had a few buddies who after college started running in 5Ks, you know, real fitness nuts. You know how that is. And I didn't want to be shown up. They were posting pictures on it. I was like, I'm going to do that, you know. So we have St. Jude, which probably many of you know, it's a very famous nonprofit in our area. That's a children's hospital in Memphis. And they do an annual 5K every fall. And I said, okay, I'm going to run that 5K a few years ago. So I'm going to do that. But every morning, y'all would try to get up before work and try to run to, you know, practice for it. And I could never do it. I said, oh, I don't have time to run a few miles before work. And it's just so hard and all this kind of stuff. So when I had a friend call me, she called me a few weeks later. She said, hey, you've been planning like you said you were going to? You going to be a laughing stock next time we meet up? I said, yeah. I said, I haven't been practicing. I told her, I said, every morning I get up, like I have time, like I'll wake up an hour early to try to go do it, but I just can't get it done. She said to me then, a piece of advice that has stuck with me and I've applied to everything else with my students, with other things that I've done. She said, okay, I got you. She said, hey, how about instead of trying to run for like 30 minutes or an hour, try the first few mornings, just try to run a mile. Try to run 1 mile. Then you'll build up to it. So the first morning I got up, I said, okay, you know what, Alex, you don't have to run a full 5K this morning. You don't have to run for an hour. Let's just run a mile. So that's what I did. After I got through with it, I said, that's not too bad. Kept doing that the next few mornings. And then by the next, about halfway through the next week, I said, I think I can run a little bit more now. I've got some self-confidence, right? I'm not feeling like an idiot running down the road because I actually am getting better at this. That's true for our students too. Somewhere deep down, they want to do better. That's why they're coming to us. You guys are the miracle workers. We are the ones who are trying to instill these soft skills in our students. And so I hope that, we've given you some ideas on transportation, on internet usage, about being able to incorporate these into your lessons, because I think that that is so valuable. But again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. This is not something to drop on our students all in one day. Building that up over time gives them the ability of self-value, self-worth. They know they can do it. They feel like now they've got the tools necessary. They're building it up one at a time. And that's important in your lessons as well, right? Nobody tries to teach a complete book on geometry all in one day. We do it one formula at a time, right? Make sure they understand that slope formula before we move on to midpoint. It's the same way with these soft skills. Blending these into different lessons slowly over time will build this up more than trying to just do it all at once in a separate lesson. So I'm a little bit over. I apologize, Patrick. I'm so sorry for doing that. But let me say this. I just love this because y'all have been so engaged. I am so appreciative for y'all inviting me this morning. And I've loved your engagement. I've loved your ideas. Like I said, I wish we all had all morning to go over this stuff. What I am going to do, y'all, is I'm going to put my name and information in the chat box. So feel free to reach out to me after this. I love to collaborate. I love to hear your ideas. If you want to talk with me about anything I discuss, or you want to collaborate on something, let me know. And for those of you attending National CoWave in a few weeks, I will actually be at that. I'll be doing a presentation on Tuesday morning at 8. I believe that's right, on math, real world applications to math. So regardless of where I can see you again, whether they're virtually, I hope I do. So thank y'all. I hope you have a great conference. Thank you, Patrick, for inviting me. And I'm signing out. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much, Alex. We so appreciate it, your insights. It's refreshing, not only for the perspective of how to help all of our students, but I also think just as a professional, sometimes it's very encouraging and very rewarding to hear from other professionals that what we do is working in some ways, even though some days it seems very difficult, but we got to stay the course. And I just really appreciate you striking that tone as well, saying that we really need to just hang in there, keep fighting the good fight and really bring to bear all the talent that we have and try to pull out all of the talent and resources that our participants bring too. So thank you so much, Alex, for this wonderful presentation. Everyone, we're going on a break here for about 15 minutes, and then our keynote speaker will be at 10:15. Hope you're having a great morning, and we'll see you soon. We'll leave the line open for just a second more if anyone's got any questions for Alex. Otherwise, we'll sign off.
Thank you again, Patrick. I appreciate it, and hope to see you in a few weeks, okay?
Absolutely. I wrote it down. I'll make sure when we're out there that we'll connect.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Great to see all of you, meet you virtually.